What is a good song for the post-Halloween season, but for before Christmas? There's no such thing as a true blue Halloween carol, or post-Halloween carol, but it is still just too early for Christmas carols. It is harvest season then. Horror movies and harvest season. No longer the time to fear the Reaper, but time to celebrate the past year and take in all the spoils. In the United States, this is the odd dead season that fills the spaces after Halloween and Thanksgiving, but before Christmas. The time when things are left rotting in the field until the snow covers them. The time dedicated to abandoned barns and creepy music. Everyone needs a good tale about the change of the seasons. What's a good song for that then? How about Blue Oyster Cult? Blue Oyster Cult's Heaven Forbid is one of the band's less engaging albums. There's a good reason for that. It is a later BOC album. Those later albums, prior to the release of the recent The Symbol Remains, were not received particularly well or widely. Heaven Forbid was released on March 24, 1998 to mixed reception, though it has its supporters and its charms. Well, Heaven Forbid has one thing, actually two. It's two infamous, purposely bad covers. Heaven Forbid also hides one Blue Oyster Cult deep cut, Harvest Moon. It is a tour de force on how to write an actual horror song. While later in the band's studio catalog, it ranks up there with the band's best songs. Its sound is more Agents of Fortune than the material that surrounds it on Heaven Forbid, being more like a spooky rock ballad from Blue Oyster Cult's early middle period. Writing credits on the song were given to Donald Roger, Buck Dharma alone, the only song on the album written by Buck solo. That may be one of the reasons why it's such a standout cut. In Blue Oyster Cult tradition, Harvest Moon is a story song, but not a novelty song. It is a classical American horror story in the form of a moody rock ballad, horror movie-esque. The pulp lineage of H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Bloch, and Stephen King. Buck has directly credited Stephen King's Airport novels as a major influence on the writing and composition of Harvest Moon, a tale of a town and evil. It takes place late in the season when mystery is at its highest, when the harvest moon shines. Could it be monsters, demons, aliens, vampires, or is it just the Blue Oyster Cult come to town? There has been a change in the weather as of recent. Harvest Moon is very much a send-up to the classic Blue Oyster Cult formula, which speaks to the band's lineup at the time, attempting to recreate that classic Blue Oyster Cult sound. The song follows a cyclical pattern in both composition sound and lyrics, like Seasons. The song concerns the strange events of a town somewhere. The town is settled, emerges, grows old, then the song ends with a departure from the town. It is the classic Blue Oyster Cult tale of ominous rock and roll. This place has a history. The Spaniards settled here. They burned the town and fields. They moved away from here. The town's early history is established as being involved with the Spaniards, either the Spanish Empire or early settlers to a region of the United States. There was a presence there, though. The seasons and history then jump to the now of the song, where the town is now an established farming community in the valley. The valley which is somewhere or nowhere. The narrator discusses this with his grandmother about how the war took all the vigor, war took the best from here. The war being either World War I or World War II, likely meant to be both in the song. The loss of men in the war has weakened the town even more, placing it into the pure gothic horror of the decayed farming town. Both the town and people have begun to decay in unison. An interesting parallel theme which reoccurs throughout the song is the town's association with farming, but something is sapping or even harvesting the town itself. The farming town is being farmed. The constant refrain of, I feel the days grow shorter, I feel the night grow cold, young people feeling restless, old people feeling old. The town which is slowly dying. The town sees loss again and again, implied to be a seasonal occurrence, as people leave. The listener is introduced to the Cobys, who works that valley. They gave that land a go. The last name Coby is an Americanized German last name derived from the name Jacob. The Cobys, though, abandoned that farm when the seasons changed, and then came the early snow. They lost their livestock that year. They lost their sheep and goats. Sheep and goats. Interesting choice of livestock for a Blue Oyster Cult song. This first incident leads one to the ominous connection with the harvest season. Was this a natural or supernatural event? Was it the cold that killed them? Was it a sacrifice? Was it that presence the Spaniards burned the land to expunge? After the failure, the Cobies departed south to work the boats, abandoning the agricultural in favor of the marine. The strangeness and darkness increases from there as the snow deepens, with the narrator saying, "I feel some evil here, I hear some frightful noises, I don't go out at night, since Bobro's youngest daughter disappeared from sight." Bobro's youngest daughter then serves as the next victim after the Cobies' livestock, if they are connected. The surname Bobro, though, is itself derived from the Russian word for sea otter, historically used by Jewish Russians as a surname. Disappeared from sight is a Lovecraft-esque fate, where one's mind assumes the worst, as the horrors that occurred no one saw. It is the sense of violation and preying upon the vulnerable, which appears in other Blue Oyster Cult songs, such as Fireworks, or even the sort of reverse scenario in I Love the Night. There have been far more victims than just Bobro's daughter, as the concluding verse of the song states. I know they'll find her someday, they find them all that way, after the thaw in springtime, the snow melts away. The town finds them all after the snow melts away. It is once again the cycle of seasons that brings about the ominous cycle of life and death, sacrifice, and the practice of the harvest. There appears to be some force or tradition asserting itself upon the population of the town again and again in the style of H.P. Lovecraft or the Welsh author Arthur Machen's short stories. The mysterious evil is embodied as a consumptive force, the harvest moon. Are all these awful events connected, though? We have one clue: the narrator and Grandma. The themes of cycles and regeneration suggest the link of blood. It is families which mainly feature throughout the song, families and kin relationships. The central one, though not heavily acknowledged, is the narrator and the narrator's grandma. Grandma has been in the town since at least the war. After Grandma's death then, the narrator takes up residence in the farmhouse. 10 years in this farmhouse, 10 years come this May, my simple needs are covered, since Grandma passed away. Long time since there's been trouble, that's what the people say. Grandma and the narrator are the common denominators, but it seems the trouble has stopped since Grandma's death. Their role concludes with the narrator selling the farmhouse, then becoming the most recent soul to leave the decaying town. The unspoken suggestion is made all the more ominous by the narrator's repeated declaration of, "I love this time of year." That is not to suggest Harvest Moon is some sort of mystery that can be solved, but its many interpretations make it a fascinating piece of horror music. Of the little that there is. Most of it by Blue Oyster Cult, or, Ghost? I don't know. What about the location of this cursed town then? Buck had this to say about the town described in Harvest Moon. This is sourced from Reddit, but it sounds like something Buck would have most likely said at some point. Harvest Moon was a story I made up in the style of a Stephen King novel, like how the town of Derry is haunted in his books. The locale was non-specific, except as rural, had farms, and 4 seasons. I read it when I lived in Ithaca, upstate New York. The evil in Harvest Moon is cyclical, only long-time resident families are aware of it. Could one come up with a more specific location other than Buck's description? Let's play the game and see what it leads to. Rural, farms, and 4 seasons. There are other hints from the song as well. Spanish settlers were involved with the history of the town. It is an American town that contributed to the war effort. The wind turns and blows the leaves from the trees. Then nights grow cold, with snow. Well, the most important mention of physical location says that the Cobies sold the farm in springtime, went south to work the boats. Buck's platonic idea of the town was inspired by Ithaca, New York, but upstate New York does not fully fit the bill. Sure, it has farms, leaf fall, 4 seasons, and one can even head south-southeast to become a fisherman along the bay/eastern seaboard, but the Spanish Empire, if Spaniard means Spanish Empire here, I'm going with the older rendition, had no major settlements in New York, though Spaniards here could also just mean immigrants. The Spanish Empire gives the town a deeper history though, which will make the video more interesting, so this theory will go with that. On personal opinion, I do think the crime conspiracies rumored to exist around the Finger Lakes in New York did partially inspire Buck, even subconsciously, when writing the song. It very much has that upstate New York Gothic feel. The Spanish element, though, pushes the location further to the south. The leaf change and snowfall keep the song in regions which experience all 4 seasons, not exactly super common in the south. Snowfall is possible in areas across the southern United States. The deep south in Florida, though, can be ignored due to the lack of full leaf fall/change and rather rare snow. The Southwest is a good region to examine. Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California. Those places often receive snow in higher elevations. The mention of went south to work the boats implies access to a coast as well. That then excludes New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and let's add Colorado, because none of those states have a coastline, which leaves only California and Texas. The mountainous regions of California might be an excellent fit. Snowfall, valleys, agriculture, and certain regions do see leaf change. California it is then. The state does, after all, have its own strange history with the mythical snake people catacomb cities below Los Angeles, and the Dark Watchers of the Santa Lucia Mountains. Occult encrypted lore. The mysterious Dark Watchers are even known by early Spanish settlers as Los Vigilantes Oscuros. Both legends worked their way into Lovecraft and later authors' depictions of the United States' eerie atmosphere. California does seem uniquely cursed in American folklore, even before the settlers got there. There's a crime, or is it a regular old supernatural event? At the most basic and surface level, one can interpret Harvest Moon as being about a series of murders. The quick conclusion is that Grandma is the killer, but that's the easy solution. She's either a serial killer whose pattern aligns with the seasons, or a more vampiric creature harvesting life from the town. That would fit with the decline of the town as parallel to Grandma's life. Blue Oyster Cult does have a penchant for songs about vampires. See here. The problem also mysteriously stops after Grandma passes away. Her death ends the trouble and allows the narrator to sell the farmhouse and leave the town. There is a presence lingering in that repetition of Harvest Moon. The narrator too has suspicion about him in Harvest Moon. The constant repetition of I love this time of year and I feel so evil here. The narrator knows all about the odd events in the town. He also knows they all find them, victims, that way after the snow melts. Does that simply refer to a discovery in the spring, or is the situation far worse than he tells? The possibility remains the narrator is either responsible, aware, or some kind of corruptive force to the town. That would explain why the killings sound to be rather indiscriminate, both humans and animals. It is not targeted, but a thirst for life. The Harvest Moon causes it to rise in the blood. This again relates back into the theme of a sort of blood curse throughout the song. A force or killer preying upon a small town is very classical horror and sci-fi in American fiction. It is common in everything from classical to modern horror. The association of autumn/Halloween with the occult would then strengthen it. It could be vampires, could be aliens descending from the moon, it could be alien vampires descending from the moon, like that one video game. Another possibility, if some want some Americana, is some distant Mesoamerican corn god taking a long revenge on the settlers. The Aztec, after all, believe themselves to have come from a cave in the American Southwest. The Spaniards could have burned the lands in an attempt to purge the influence of this strange god, the power of this anonymous vengeful god waxing and waning with the seasons. The Mesoamerican corn gods were usually associated with the seasonal cycle, or lack of cycle, and famous for the violence of their myths, usually appearing skinned like husks of corn. The killings then would be connected to both ritual sacrifice and crop harvest like corn/maize. The deaths are all undescribed, so the listener can draw any conclusion or picture in their mind. Often the worst possible. I hear some frightful noises. I don't go out at night. Bodies in an unknown state left buried beneath the snow to defrost in the spring. There is an unknown ancestral evil which holds the town in its grip. If one wants a more literary or realistic reading of Harvest Moon, a realistic reading of a Blue Oyster Cult song, it's always going to be a little out there, one can easily read it as a parable about agrarian/rural decay in post-World War II America, the once proud town that begins to decline after the war. It is victimized by a force that is beyond it, that the populace can't exactly name. It is changed or drained of energy. The town falls victim to a force it cannot fight against, that robs the young of their youth or forces them to leave. It may simply be time alone. The old are left to linger like ghosts with only their history to satisfy or comfort them. Slowly, the town begins to hollow out and empty, old, gray, abandoned. It is a theme Blue Oyster Cult knows well with their familiarity with upstate New York post-1960s. The family names mentioned in the song reflect the areas the band would have been familiar with. Agricultural areas founded by German and Russian immigrants. Also several Jewish and French-Canadian ones, but those aren't mentioned in the song. Towns that now exist only to be left empty, dying, abandoned. The streets empty, the fields dying, and the barns abandoned. Conspiracies and generational analysis differ from person to person, field to field, interest to interest, but there is a unifying sadness. One is left with a lingering sense of wrongness on their departure from the song, as if one is leaving the town. Here is Buck Dharma's conclusion to the song then. Once again, source from Reddit, so take it with a grain of salt, but it sounds legitimate enough. The mechanism of bad is unstated, only that the area would suffer from cyclical periods of bad stuff happening, then periods of peace and harmony. Only the old-timers would be hip to it, and there was an almost conscious effort to ignore it as long as it was dormant, and not speak of it when it wasn't. It was inspired by the evil that Stephen King describes in many of his books, the way the town of Derry is afflicted with bouts of evil stuff, the way the Overlook is fouled by evil. It's a general idea that can be applied in many ways, suited to your interest. So put Harvest Moon into that Halloween or Christmas playlist. It is the dead season. The harvest season, after all. Harvest Moon. I'll send a season's reapings to my supporters, Violanon, and an anonymous patron.